associate at India House, who's also a partner to the program. We have a wonderful panel with us today to discuss on examining the challenges and effective approaches to entrepreneurship education. Starting with, we have Ruchita ji. Ruchita ji is a seasoned academician and policy researcher with over 3 decades of experience. She has impacted lakhs of students, thousands of trainers, and diverse communities. She specializes in curriculum design, capacity building, and applied learning. Her core interest lies in creating platforms where academia and industry converges. Welcome, Ruchita ji. We also have Siddharth Narayanan ji with us. Siddharth ji is the founding director of Bharat Tech Foundation, a global alliance of engineers on the resolve to transform the world. He works at the intersection of technology, skilling, and entrepreneurship. Prior to this, he also looked at the Strategic Alliance at Office of Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India. An entrepreneur himself, Siddharth ji brings very unique lens to the discussion, as well as somebody who has worked very closely in the policy space. Welcome, Siddharth ji.
Thank you.
We have Shubhankar Chaudhry ji with us, again, an entrepreneur. He is currently the Entrepreneurial Business Development Executive, passionate about scalable tech-centric solutions. He has worked with all 3 tiers of Indian government and various Fortune 500 companies. He's currently the CEO and co-founder of Cybersault Systems, CEO and co-founder of the Carbon Capture Company, and Chief Innovation and Strategy Officer at Saptang Labs. Welcome, Shubhankar ji.
Thank you, Aswathi.
Wonderful. So I thought we could start with a fundamental question and then probably go dig deeper, if that's okay with everyone. So on the topic, examining challenges and effective approaches in entrepreneurship education. So when we say entrepreneurship education, what are we really looking at? Is it getting students to be skilled in starting startups, or are we looking at building problem-solving skills, or something else? What are we looking at when we say entrepreneurship education? Ruchita ji, we can probably start with you, moving to Siddharth ji and then Shubhankar ji.
So, good afternoon, everyone. And at the outset, I thank the organizers and Gullak Dialogue for this opportunity. It's indeed, and of course, India House. So, it's nice to be on this platform. And just to get into the topic very quickly and answer your question. So, basically, I mean, I've also been listening to the sessions earlier on. So, just to understand what others have been feeling about various aspects that we've been discussing across. And what comes to my mind is having heard a lot of what they feel about entrepreneurship or the education amongst it. Most of the time, we are looking at what we want, what is it that we need to do. But it's also very important to know what should not be done. So I don't want to start on a negative note, but having said that, I would want to say that, we all talk about opportunity. We look at the different literacy, different skills that we want. But do we really, we should really sit back and think, are we talking about an emotional resilience at some time? Because we are so much, overall, when you look at school, and I'm starting from, whatever grade we do, everyone's want to train to win. To be there, to be in that space, to win, to participate. Yes, slowly people are like, okay, participation is important. But what about failure? Sometimes there would be failure, but are we talking failures? Most of the time we talk about all kinds of successes. Different organizations have been working there, all putting their best foot forward. Correct, that's really important. But we need to know what is it that is failing us, and therefore we need to focus on how not to fail, okay, but how to manage that failure. Because with that failure comes a whole lot of stress management. And you might think that I'm not talking the typical terms that people are talking when it comes to entrepreneurship or with regards to business and all these. I think ultimately it's about making the person. So when we look at what makes you with the life skills. So today, at the level of the school, when we are looking at training the students, we first also need to go back to the teachers. because we are looking at a range of schools. Yes, while our focus is on the public schools, yes, and a lot of initiatives are being taken, but I would not restrict it to just public schools. I would go down even to the level of the private sector. So much so is the competition to succeed that we are not really uh, analyzing whether we are giving them the life skills, because once we look at the life skills, I think we get a lot of it. So when we're looking at entrepreneurship education, I think it's important to learn, to go back and to even, as much as look into our scriptures. I'm not against, in fact, I'm very pro all the new technologies and all the techie things that come in, and they have to be combined. But we need to take some of these lessons, because more of life has been focused in our tradition. Slowly as we moved away and compartmentalized a lot of things, we probably have moved away from the core, and along it we have all the concentric circles of different things. But what is at the core? At the core is making a human. At the core is talking about how, amidst taking all the skills together, what is it that really makes you tick in terms of how can you handle the good as well as the bad, the success as well as failure, the opposites what come, because these are some things that they come off and on at every stage, a mixed moment, like at every time. But then are we able to handle that? So that is one. Second, are we moving away from an environment or from our nature? Because in all this, I'm not against any kind of business, and in fact, I'm pro all the new things, but this should be integrative. The thought has to be integrated into it. So when it comes to the environment around us, so it's two things, two aspects. The environment around us is the people and the things, the matter as well. So which means to say, in the process, if we are sensitive to our surroundings which make up man and matter, then automatically we would look at our own development and our own thought process and mindset being inclusive. So inclusive of what? Inclusive of the haves and the have nots, inclusive of those who, ultimately are able to drive things because of their spirit. I would like to just quote a small shloka. We say about the sun. We say that the sun god has a ratha, he has a chariot which are driven by 7 horses, and they have the bridles as the snakes. The snakes go here and there, and he doesn't even have a path which is chalked out for him. So yet every day he makes his presence day in and day out, on that path which is not even marked for him. So what is it that makes this happen? I mean, people may call it mythology, whatever you call it, but it's an example to take from. We are looking at a very beautiful concept which says, Kriya Siddhi Satve Vasati Mahatam Nopakarane. Very simply put, the success of anything, where is it? It's in your spirit, it's in your being, and not in the resources. As in, this does not mean that, okay, we have no resources, how are we going to do it? They are equally important, but it's your spirit. Are you able to drive it? And that's where most of those points come in, where we say, can you recognize an opportunity? Do you have that creativity? Are you able to think innovatively? Are you able to take that risk? And of course, a calculated one. And then how do you manage the resources or even bring resources? And ultimately, the base or the adhishtan, the substratum of all this, I think, is the ethics and the social responsibility. Because when we look at businesses, it's all profit oriented. And I was listening to Mr. Shubham also this morning, and how he talked a lot about social entrepreneurship. But the base of any entrepreneurship, I would like to say, is an ethical, moral, ethical acknowledgement of things and the way we go about it. That's what I feel should be a part of the entrepreneurship education. And to be very specific, why not take examples from the Panchatantra? Why not? These are all stories, and ultimately it's stories that we all connect to. Whatever your age, whatever level, whatever grade you're at, when the school, whether it's a school's child or a college student, ultimately it's about that story. But the essence, we are not able to, or I think that skill, as an educator, I have seen slowly the skill of being able to read between the lines and take the essence of it is lost in all the facts and all the information that we are gathering. Because today, with our technologies, we can get the information, but to analyze that information and to draw the essence of it, what we say as rasa, take the rasa out of it, is what makes you. Because taking so many such essences is what will enable us to build upon all these other aspects that we've spoken of. So in short, this is what I think is entrepreneurship education. And I can elaborate, but I should also be sensitive of my other colleagues who are here. So for now, this is what I have to say. But please tell me whenever you want me to elaborate, and I can go in depth as required. Thank you.
Sure, Ruchita ji. Siddharth ji?
Thank you. So that is very eloquently put by Ruchita ji. And to start off, my concept comes from the historical aspect, right? India has always been an entrepreneurial nation where we had shipbuilders, we had even the Cholas conquering further lands. Not because they wanted to just conquer lands, but it was all started with business alliances and larger wealth motive. And we have texts like Arthashastra that also talks about wealth and the linkages between wealth and social governance as well. Uh, but somewhere along the way, we kind of did go down a little bit, in my opinion, but we are slowly getting back. As we speak at this moment, India is home to the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, with more than 1.57 lakh startups registered at DPIIT, based on the last December's data. And when we look at it, we have significant number of uh, these policies and startup frameworks, everything created for a lot of colleges and institutions. Yes, but for nurturing entrepreneurship across the age groups above 18 and 22, and we also have Shark Tank, which kind of made this whole startup valuations, everything, a home household concept, where even your grandmother sits and talks about startups and valuation today, instead of watching these brain rot content, right? So we are changing in that direction. But the question is, are we giving these value systems, these knowledge bases to the 12-year-olds, the 14-year-olds, who are the future of India, who are going to create India that one day we may not be a part of, but they will be. So India has about 24 crore school students and about 14 crores enrolled in government schools, and just touching 10%. If we can create 10% problem solvers who are with by improving their one problem solving creative confidence and their ability and their actual exposure to the real world, we will be creating the largest youth innovation pipeline the world has ever seen, and India would definitely be leading in that. But today, in my opinion, many school entrepreneurship programs kind of remain very theoretical. They focus mostly on these business plan formats. So I was part of the Young Indians in Young CIS Youth Forum, and we I was part of the Innovation Entrepreneurship Council there in Cochin, and we created a competition. But the competition's title initially was the business plan competition, where a student just creates a business plan and that's it, and we evaluate and we say goodbye. That's it. Then during my this year, we created something called a design thinking competition, where we went from problem identification to actually creating the solution and pitching the solution also, where some of the innovations have been taken by other senior entrepreneurs and there has been funding also given, which has gone to the next stage. So in my opinion, so we should focus on all these dimensions, right? To put it a little more directly, an entrepreneurship education, to put in a framework format, must contain one, the problem solving capability, the ability to create a strategy and a vision for the startup and for the nation. For business education, where all the business plans, the financial modeling, etc., comes into picture. Sales ability to sell, and finally, which obviously my panelists have touched upon, also a part of it has been touched upon, is Vyakti Nirman. Well, you can obviously be an entrepreneur by creating an Amazon or an e-commerce marketplace for drugs, obviously. But that does not mean that you are somebody who's creating a better country, better nation, better people. I would not call that a social entrepreneur, right? So Vyakti Nirman also definitely forms an important part, along with the other mentioned aspects. So we will definitely dive deeper onto it in the further conversations. But for me, problem solving, creating strategies and visions, business education, sales ability, and Vyakti Nirman are the 5 key aspects of entrepreneurial education. Over to you.
Thank you, Siddharth ji. That was very comprehensive. Shubhankar ji?
Hi, everyone. Very interesting points. I like to look at it from a very different perspective because, I have been following lately, how Japan is doing this and how South Korea is approaching these things, how some of the schools in Europe have, changed their curriculums entirely. And one of, a unique thing which I have been observing personally in India is I have colleagues who have started pulling their children out of school, even at like young ages, like, 11, 12, or 10 years. And now they are homeschooling them because they believe that our current education system is not empowering their children for the future. They feel that, their students, their children should start learning coding at the age of 10, so that by the time they turn 18 they would already be able to set up their own startups, set up their own companies. So I think we are at a very interesting crux where, with the advent of, AI post COVID, the amount of exposure which today's students have to the global database, we could have never even imagined this, like growing up in school, when we were, like, I say it that, we, whatever is happening now, I always try to assess it that, we don't even understand, how Gen Z and Gen X thinks today. Their approach to things, their understanding of things is a lot different than what it used to be in the 90s or early 2000s. So at the same time, our education curriculum needs to evolve parallelly to the way AI is growing at such a fast pace. Of course, we have the NEP 2020, and it is very impactful. A lot of work has gone in before, these new policies have been introduced, and it is very disruptive. But post COVID, the way AI is growing, it is even more disruptive. So my perspective here has been that not just entrepreneurship, but also, the value systems around entrepreneurship is something which is very, very important, which we need to imbibe in students right at school level. Today, I have two startups, and we keep trying to raise funds globally. Um, uh, in the last 10 years, the way global VCs look at Indian startups, the environment is very, very negative, because they have seen so many sad stories where, just for making quick bucks and just for increasing valuations, our Indian startup ecosystems have really exploited these VCs sitting in Europe and in US. And now the moment they get to know, oh, okay, you're a startup, oh, where are you based? And you tell them I'm in India, and all of a sudden their due diligence level just shoots up like 5 times than what it would be for a startup in Europe or in US. So, of course, I'm not saying that everyone has that unethical approach. But unfortunately, because of what has happened in the last 10 years in the Indian startup ecosystem, so many big investors losing out on so much money. Whether you look at, examples like Byju's, or you look at examples like, Oyo, uh, there is a very serious concern that why is it that the Indian entrepreneurship ecosystem is so corrupted? So I think if we start giving that value system right at, school level, I think it is something which will get totally imbibed into them. And just like Siddharth said, I absolutely agree. Vyakti Nirman is more important than, teaching them the basics of business at that stage. Over to you, Aswathi.
Thank you, Shubhankarji. I think all three of our panelists have stressed on personal development, life skills, and Vyakti Nirman as one of the core aspect of entrepreneurship education. Siddharthji, I had a follow-up question to what you had spoken, and probably I'll also open it up to both Shubhankarji and Ruchitaji. When you said one of the problems is also that our curriculums or whatever initiatives have been so far taken are very theoretical. So zooming out on it, we do have at central level ATEL missions, and at state level multiple different initiatives taken. Some have been successful, but mostly probably not come out with the outcomes that we wanted. So apart from it being theoretical, what do you see are the barriers in entrepreneurship education translating into actual development of entrepreneurial skills in students?
Hi, yes. Am I audible? I believe my internet is slightly finicky, so yeah, perfect. So so yeah, definitely I'm not gonna blame any entity, right? Atal Tinkering Labs have done a fantastic job, and different institutions have capitalized on different schemes differently. So that is one aspect that we can definitely have a discussion on later if required. But on a little on if you had to go a little more on the barriers, what kind of stops? In my opinion, would be the lack of market understanding and the linkage with industry or the market. Right. So I had visited a college in Cochin, and it is one of the good ones, one of the good institutions. So we had a program there where we were talking about space technologies and all that, right? So we had a visit to all their the innovations from there, but the sad reality was that most of the innovations, most of the models, the most of the prototypes were all in the shelves. It never saw the reality. It never came out. It did not go to market in the startup language. So one would be one key factor that we had a discussion on there, right there, was that a student by in a college specifically, and in school context by 12th grade, or in college by fourth year of engineering, usually leaves the college in search of a job, and probably they get a job into a good company, about 4 to 5 LPA, let's say. But they completely abandoned the whole process, and unfortunately, the idea, maybe it may be good, maybe a failure, may have potential to pivot, but still they just go. It just gets left off right there. So in on that, one of my opinions would be to not purely have a mere connection between the student and the professor as building the solution, but have one more partner, an industry partner, a mentor, a retired person, somebody where the accountability stretches on, and obviously access to funding and everything. That is a larger point. So one is the fact that schooling or educational facility and the startup or the idea or the innovative product, the project withers away. That is, in my opinion, one area. And secondly, the lack of actual industry linkage. So these are the two areas. One is mentorship, one is industry or market linkage. Rather, I would like to change from industry to market linkage.
Thank you, Siddharth. Shubhankarji?
See, I feel, I totally agree that, mentorship is one part, and then, market linkage is another part. But I think also what we need to add to it is that when we are teaching entrepreneurship, or many people don't understand, entrepreneurship and innovation are two different things, right? Science and technology are two different things, right? We often end up confusing them. So I'll give you an example. So I had this cousin, and when he passed out of when he was about to pass out of school, I asked him, so what do you want to do? So he said, I'll become an entrepreneur. So I said, okay, so what will you do? So he said, I'll become a DJ. So I said, okay. So I said, but do you understand that a DJ is not a career? He said, how does it matter? Right. So these basic concepts are not clear in our current ecosystem, that you know entrepreneurship is one part. Entrepreneurship is identifying opportunities, and working around them. But innovation is something which is totally different, because only when you can innovate, then only you can create large scale ecosystems, and that is something which really lacks today. Of course, Atal Tinkering Labs was something, which really helped, excite students, because nothing like that was available before that. And now they need to really go into the next phase. Like, some of the private schools are doing a lot of work around it, right? They are trying to set up robotics labs. They have these high-end robotics workshops, but of course the cost is so high that, of course, government will have to bring in those funds if we have to do it at government school levels. But parallel to setting up that infrastructure and giving those resources, we really need to create an environment on innovation. Today, as a country, we hardly spend any money on R&D, Of course, it's not just the government, even the corporate sector is not contributing, even though some of them want to, because there is no ecosystem to foster innovation today. So I think if we are going to focus on entrepreneurship, then parallelly, we also need to focus on creating an innovation ecosystem right at our school levels.
Ruchita ji, any thoughts on this?
Yes. So basically, when we are looking at why does it not culminate into something actionable development or something like that, we first need to know the start. As in, most of the time we look at very big things, huge things. What is the difference I'm going to make to the nation? What am I going to create for as a solution for the country or for my state? Why don't we look around ourselves? The thing is, when you are able to localize and identify your local problem, ultimately it's about finding solutions. Who's an entrepreneur? When you look at an entrepreneur, he's a person who can identify an opportunity, who can mobilize whatever resources are there, and this could go take a risk, fine, but it could be in the space of culture, it can be in the space of economy, it can be social, it can be anything. It's a problem to which you're finding a solution, and to take it further, innovative solution. Great. Now, when we don't identify or we lack in identifying what our problems really are at the basic level, and work on something which is not really going to, this I'll explain maybe with an example from the territory that I work in, largely in Jammu and Kashmir as well as in Goa. So it's basically, unless we are able to see what is here, everybody wants to have a tech solution to everything. But there are more than tech solutions as well. So in the process, when we are looking for a tech solution, we ourselves are limiting our thought to only one dimension of thinking. The solution to a problem need not always be tech. Yes, at some point in time, when we want to scale up, when we want to take it to the next higher level, we do have to bring in the element of tech. But to start with, when a student is thinking, very often I have seen, even amongst my peer in the education field, an idea which has got a tech background, yes, great, we must do this, fine. But when it has got something to do with your culture, to literature, to any of these dimensions, oh no, it's not really going to tradition, or any of these, no, it's not going to have any value. Why do it? But then after all this process, finally we come around circle to this. So we need to identify the problem which is local, or up to your district maybe, or maybe then go ahead to the state, or then to the to a very big problem, because we are looking at entrepreneurship at school. We are looking at building these at the level of the school. So we need to understand how a child thinks. So there is a lot of understanding we need to put to understand the psyche of a student. Yes, it's important to allow him to stretch and know more beyond what he does, but understand how the child thinks, understand the psyche of the child. How much exposure are we giving that child to be able to think beyond and think in a holistic manner, not with a one-sided view. So if a child is able to identify, like I'll give you an example in Jammu and Kashmir, today the youth do not want to go into agriculture. If you ask them, their family, the last 4 generations have been into, let us say, farming of saffron or fruit or whatever it may be. But you ask the child or you ask the parent, will your child get into it? No. They don't want to put their hands in the ground. Okay, that's where tech comes in, agreed. So you have to be able to show that to them. But the fact that they don't want to get into agriculture limits them completely, because the spine of their economy, the backbone of their economy is to do with agri and agri allied agricultural sectors. So what is the core? Are we trying to take it away from there? Now, in Goa, you'll see everybody wants to, because tourism is high, the children may be educated, or some of them, they don't want to be. They just want to be having a taxi and run a taxi and, I wouldn't say fleece or whatever their rates are, they're happy to just have a taxi and run. They do not really care much about different avenues of livelihood. That is the next step. But why are they thinking like this? Because we have failed maybe, or we've limited ourselves to not being able to sow the right seed or the right understanding of what entrepreneurship is, of what an entrepreneurial mindset is, and what an entrepreneur is. So if we are able to do that, that's when you will see the actual development. And yes, a pilot which is made, a prototype which is made, like was rightly said by my colleagues, they said that yes, it sits in the lab. And for this, I fully agree, because some of the initiatives that, as our organization, as Vivek Park Foundation and Policy Advocacy Research Center, we have tried to see how we should be able to bridge the uh, industry academia gap. But industry academia gap, not from a very huge, even the smaller things. Like some of the recommendations we made to the education department in J&K was to get the industry to come and to, orient the students about it, because when they hear something inspirational, when they see something inspirational, that's when they want to do it. And then there is a connect which the industry can, like was rightly said, that they need to support these. So this has to be a part of the policy framework, that the gap that is there can be bridged in these small ways. And it's ultimately these small things that are going to make the big difference, because once that connect is there at the start, at the initial level, then we can give the industry, can give it direction to move in the larger space, and to get even solutions to their problems, which may, the industry has solutions at for their problems at the higher level. But where does it all begin? It begins somewhere at the root. Unfortunately, our systems are all, have largely focused so far on the fruit and the flower and the leaves and the trunk. But what about the root? So it's that root where we need to, be able to say, okay, so here I have a school that is connected for 2 3 different things to different industry. Like one industry may not be able to, because it may not be their area of work, because ultimately the industry too wants to see what is going to benefit them in some way. I mean, there is a social dimension to it, but it has to benefit. So ultimately the culmination of a problem to a solution will happen when we identify the problem from the smallest space locally, then take it and expand it and take it to the next higher level. Scale up comes much later. A business or proposition comes much later. But at the very first level, these small things should be looked at from all aspects, not just a tech solution to everything, or at least in two phases. Like look at it, if you have a cultural issue, then look at it how you can take it to the first level. The second level will be a tech. So the child should be, when we are educating him or mentoring him or her, that at that time we have to be able to show these dimensions. And once again, I come back to this point, that at all places we do not have mentors or our teachers who can mentor them too well. We need to orient even the teachers. I give you one simple example. An example of when I was working in the space of creating content, and we used a flip model for the first time for educating students. When the tabs and all came in, we created a whole lot of digital content, AV content, and a lot of things. And teachers were so averse to having a flip model in schools. Why? Because they felt, then where will we be able to, show our skills of a teacher? But we forget that a teacher is a facilitator. So a facilitator has to facilitate knowledge imparting or the process, and not be the one who's shining in the class. I mean, just to give you an example that way, because today everyone wants to put glamour to every profession, and education is no exception to it. So when you're doing this, if the teacher can be taught, these basic things, taught in the sense teacher is also a learner, so I mean, has to be. So these things should be there. That's when they'll be able to orient it, right? Because having an external mentor can be only for a certain amount of time, like we saw in the NGOs yesterday, that ultimately you got to transfer it, make the school, or ultimately they are the owner of the thing once you have trained them. So these things will happen when all the stakeholders of that particular system are educated or are trained for a particular thing. Otherwise we have lopsided things, like the students are getting smarter, but if the mentors or the teachers or their trainers are not, equally trained to look at it from that perspective. And that's a series. Today we have new trainers, that's fine, but we have to also look at the system as a whole across the country. We are not looking at only the first, the metropolitan cities or the tier 1 cities. What about the towns? What about, that's where the change is. And today when I'm just taking an example of China, where you have the infrastructure and all reaching, the same quality of infrastructure reaching right down to the villages. But if we don't see that here, however many tinkering labs we have, we need to see whether those tinkering labs are catering to the local problems or facilitating the solution to local problems. We have great tinkering labs. We have great support given to them. And a lot of this initiative has got a lot of support from the center and from everywhere. But I mean, at the end of it, if agriculture is your problem, are you giving them enough such kind of things to work on, space to work on? STEM is important, but STEM, again, bring it to local things. There are so many places where your local issues are not solved, which entrepreneurship can take care of it. but we are not looking at it. So we need to, as policymakers or as people who want to make a difference in the Vyakti Nirman, we should not fail by not having the right thing in place, because our Vyakti Nirman will eventually affect the Rashtra Nirman. And that Rashtra Nirman is getting affected today because our Vyakti Nirman from this perspective has been, a little lopsided in between. And yes, like my peer said so far, that colleague said that yes, there are a lot of initiatives are being taken and we are moving to the fore, all that is there. But let's not miss the bus by seeing what the root cause is. Once the root cause is identified, your solution will also focus on that root cause of the problem, because the base of all this is problem solving. So the problem has to be identified correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchita ji. I would like to pick one thing from what you spoke about, teachers being facilitators. And Siddharth ji and Shubhankar ji, I would like to hear from both of you as well. At what point does, in entrepreneurship education, a teacher's role end, and where does a mentor from industry or market come in? Siddharth ji, you can go first, and then Shubhankar ji.
Yes. So, when thinking about that, right? So, in that specific aspect, when a student is in the school, so the Vyakti Nirman part is mainly taken care by the teacher, of course. But let's say there is I'm going to tech again. I understand. Obviously, we have to look at entrepreneurship in the whole larger aspect, because I'm from the tech background. So I'm just giving examples in the tech domain. So let's say some young these days, as we go into Gen Z and further generations, I'm realizing that they have more knowledge about the things than what can be taught in schools also, right? So let's say there is a student who has a very interesting startup idea, but in the quantum space. Of course, a school teacher may not be capable of teaching or guiding that person in the technical aspects. Of course, true. And probably giving 100 hours of training to a teacher may also not bear a lot of fruit due to lack of interest and a lot of things. If you look at larger sense. But the teacher is somebody who can give those fundamental abilities of the student to, one, create collaborations, be a friend, be a partner who can collaborate or find the right collaborators. Second, the failure mindset, ability to handle failures, and as Ruchita mentioned, handling the overall the other side of entrepreneurship and the mental, creating that mental strength aspect. Then third would be facilitating these linkages. So teacher is of course definitely needed to facilitate these industry or local community partnerships, or accessing where to go. Like for example, let's say there is a so there's a fund specifically given for students. So a student may not be initially aware of it, probably missed it while researching. A teacher can facilitate or help connect with the right set of people who can guide him to that particular person. So in my opinion, a teacher would be a stage one mentor or a facilitator. That's it. But beyond that, it's the student's capability or the student's ability to find the right set of mentors, or use the mentor platform. That there are a lot of platforms that you can find mentors from. Use that platform, find the mentor, work mentor who has a good understanding of quantum or whichever technology that person is working on. Right. So that is where I believe there's a significant difference. The teacher is good. The main person who's handling the foundational aspects of the student, creating that person, Vyakti Nirman side of things. While the mentor is a person who creates or gives the larger ideas, knowledge, specifically technical expertise or go-to-market strategies to take this project or innovation startup, whichever, into the next stage. So that would be a difference that, in my opinion, I would state. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Very interesting. So, Aswathi, I think definitely the teacher is like the first person who will hold your hand. When it comes to anything, during your school life, and definitely there will be a stage where teachers cannot give students the right inputs when it comes to those real entrepreneurial journeys, which may be better for some real mentor who's an entrepreneur or an experienced entrepreneur to give those inputs and that guidance to them. But at the same time, now how do we do this? That is, I think, a more challenging task. So like when we were passing out of school in 10th grade and 11th grade, there used to be these workshops where officers would come from the Air Force and from the Navy and from the Army, and then they would um, educate students about what they can do, and if they would like to get into the forces, they can prepare for the NDA exams, and they would also inspire them, that this is something which you can do to serve your country. And many of those students do get inspired, they do get motivated, and then they go and join the NDA exam. So two things here, I think, as an experiment, which if any of the schools do, I think it can then be taken at a national scale as well. So they still have these MUN programs, the mock Model United Nations, where they try to bring students together, and then they represent different countries, because they may not be able to study that much in their political science class as much as they can when they do that research on their own, right? They go, they check online references, and then they invite outside retired diplomats or retired journalists who have intense knowledge on geopolitics to judge those sessions. Maybe we can start having mock Shark Tank programs where students are allowed to stipulate certain kind of ideas, and then they can run those numbers through simulations, and then once the program is completed, they can have their own school alumni who are entrepreneurs come and judge those sessions, because something like that is what will really start motivating those students, and then they can from that platform they can start early and young on identifying them. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubhankarji. I like the idea of mock Shark Tanks. Shubhankarji, I also wanted to have a follow-up with what you said about how India currently does not have an ecosystem that fosters innovation. So I just wanted to understand, what would that look like? Apart from, of course, more funds in R&D, what would an ecosystem that facilitates, that's conducive for innovation look like?
Yeah. So I think it's the first step would be, to start with the students early on, when they start developing their neural networks at the new phase, like once they are in 4th and 5th grade, that what innovation actually is, like crash course in innovation, how innovation has been happening over the last 1,000 years, what top innovations have happened over the last 100 years, what top innovations have happened after the .com domain, what top innovations have happened after the mobile era. So that they understand that innovation has always been happening, but the pace of innovation is accelerating like anything now. So that being part one. Part two has to be definitely that we need to teach students early on how to think out of the box, right? Today, especially when we are trying to hire people or interview people, this is one of the biggest gaps which I see, that they don't think out of the box. Even if you give them an assignment, they would just go online and search for some other university global paper, some research which is happening in China, something which is happening in Australia, something which is happening in US, and they are so good at combining all of it and making something new out of it. But if you tell them that, if I lock them up in a room and tell them you have no foreign references, just try to write this thing yourselves, they really have no clue how to do it. So that is something which we have missed out in our building blocks of the education system, that they need to think out of the box. That creativity is something, I think, which our current system misses today.
Yes. Siddharth, Ruchita, any inputs on this?
Yeah. So first off, before we talk about innovation, I'm a student of innovation. So I'm still learning. I'm in the first steps of learning about innovation itself, right? We have good experts here also on innovation. But one thing to add on to what Shubhankar mentioned about putting students having a situation where students don't have any references and to kind of copy or kind of modify any existing innovation. So, in my opinion, we basically all young people, or when we are in school, we used to be rebels somewhere or the other, right? We used to question every single thing. But in my humble opinion, the thing is somewhere along the way we stopped that. We kind of forced them to conform to certain rules or societal norms, right? When a student asks a question, or rather when a young child asks a question to the parent, so that is where innovation kind of begins. When we or older people who have a set of conformed opinions on something, and the student comes and questions that, what is the kind of answer that we give? Or do we even give an answer? Do we say, go figure it out yourself? And obviously, he may fail. I mean, he may fail. So, in my opinion, one, we lost the rebellion or the questioning capability somewhere along the way. And second, the taboo that is attached to failing. The taboo attached to failing. So these two things, to go along with the Vyakti Nirman aspect of the whole thing, is where I believe we have to work a lot more on not training or teaching the students. I mean, obviously they are already coming with a lot of questions, but to work with probably the larger society around them, in my opinion. Yeah.
That was a nice one. Nevertheless, I mean, both of you had your opinions to it. Was really nice listening to it. Wanted to add a little to this is, just one example that yes, what you said is right. We stopped questioning. And at one end, I mean, I'll just give you one example. This is a live example in college where we've seen students post-COVID, I'm deliberately mentioning post-COVID. Okay, post-COVID, they didn't want to ask questions. If in a classroom you were asked, the teacher after a session had asked, "Do you have any questions?" So it was like, no, they had no questions. No questions. I mean, this is reality. They don't have questions. So why do they not have questions? Because everything today is looked at largely as information, knowing, knowing. So they know that we can resort to anything, like you said, that everything is accessible. Then you concoct it together, put it together, and you have one fantastic piece of literature or whatever that you have developed. But what we are slowly failing to even teach them is knowing is not doing. Knowing is not doing, because today we have stopped doing things with our hands. Like the young generation, if you ask them to do something, they're not interested. They're like, okay, as long, fine, that mobile, all those things are there, but why have these thoughts on innovation, or what, how will that come? It's not going to come all of a sudden at at graduation or a standard 12 you say, okay, think out of the box. They just have lost, they've never stepped onto that journey of thinking out of the box, because thinking out of the box and your midbrain activation happens at a very early age. And that is up to the age of 13, max 14. That's little too late. But say about from 4 to 13 is your midbrain activation. Because, I mean, this might sound very, out of the normal for you all to look at it from this space, because we are talking entrepreneurship, we are talking innovation and all. But we need to understand that these things begin much earlier. And I think if we go back to, okay, I will consider myself also out of an earlier generation to you all probably. And at that time, we were trained to do so many things, not deliberately. They were like indirect, okay? Memorizing, doing things with your hand, and all those things were there, which actually helped. And thinking back, now, why is it at that time it's a drudgery? But thinking back, you will see that it is these things which allow you to have questioned. Another thing we need to remember is that innate intelligence is of different types. Forget Bloom's taxonomy or anybody's taxonomy. You can call it by any name. We go by our traditional taxonomy. So everybody has got some intellect, and you can think out of the box in that domain. We are all domain experts today. But that domain is something that we need to identify in children at that age. And when you do, they will be able to think. Like if I do not have much of kinestetical intelligence, I may have it, but less compared to maybe intrapersonal or interpersonal or maybe something else. So my way of thinking, my way of innovating would come largely in that space and not in another. I may fail there or I may be less there. And therefore, giving that varied range of opportunity to think out of the box happens largely in your school days, in the school days. So when you come to college and when you are in your, 11, 12th, and by then you have formed certain systems and your body, your brain is attuned to that, those parts of the brain which are required for that development. It's not about learning from the book and then vomiting. I know so many people will say, oh, it's given in the book, go buy the book and you will do it. But why have so many startups failed then? I know of a person who has done his PhD on various startups and how they have failed in between. Why? Because there are many reasons to it. And it's not just following a book, because we can write an SOP and here, take this SOP, follow it and you will succeed. But that's not how it happens. There is so much more to it than just a defined path. And very, very often that path also has to be defined with certain rules, certain framework is there, but within that framework, each of us have to find our own way. And today we have stopped finding our own way in amongst the newer generation of students. You may call them Gen Z, you may call them intelligent, they all are, but we are not tapping that intelligence that they have got today. Maybe somewhere we need to think back. While making our frameworks, we need to think back that today they will resort to XYZ, but beyond that XYZ, what is it that they are not doing, which our or earlier generations did well? We didn't have the labeled entrepreneurs then. We may not have had the labeled whatever XYZ terms that you want to use here. But there still wasn't that called innovation then? Today we are ascribing a fancy name to it, but did we not have innovations earlier also? We should not, what we need to do, I think, is to give that opportunity of being able to think out of the box from childhood. And that's where when I kind of thought earlier of life skills, isn't thinking out of the box a life skill also? So that is that the formative years make a big difference. And well, I myself have been in the field of education, but I will still say that the trainer plays a very important role, because the child spends large number of hours at the place where he's training, apart from the home. So new parents, new academicians, I think we need to go a little sometimes step away. Like we say, tatastha. Standing tatastha means standing on the bank and then looking at things as a third person. We are so much into things today that we are not looking at things as an external. We are looking at things as we are in it. And therefore, we could be losing out on a dimension to our approach, because we are looking at we being in it. Like we are, let's say today we have to frame a policy, let's say random, and we are looking at it, oh, policy. We are looking at it because we are in it. We need to step back and then look at that system as an external person. That's when we will be able to see what works. It's not a matter of flaw finding, but when will we be able to get this innovation? When will we be able to develop that ecosystem? When we are able to first ingrain into the child what is innovation, or what is that which is required to think innovatively? What is it that is required to think out of the box? Today, immediately, when a child is doing something and he does it wrong, what do? We correct it. Hey, no, this is not the way. Do it this way, it will come. Let that exploration is lost because experiential learning experiences have become lesser. Like I said, it's all about making them know, but knowing is not doing. And lesser, the more and more they will do with their hands or with whatever you give them, the makers lab, call it whatever you like to call it, any fancy name. Let them do whatever they may be. Then today you come up with all these during Ganpati time. People make just for their interest, they make Ganpati with what kind of things? They are not sculptors, but they do. So it means that given that space to be and think, anyone can do it, but we are not giving them that space. And I think in our curriculum, when we are looking at, like Shubhankar ji rightly said about when he was studying Japanese and the Korean and the other systems, what is it that is different there? If you look at the Japanese system, they allow so much of doing by hand, right? As much as cleaning their own schools and bathrooms. I mean, I'm not taking it to that extent, but what I'm saying is it all begins there, in that formative stage between 3-4 years and 13 years. We need to tap this well when we are looking at any reforms or when we are looking at any policy frameworks or what, that focus has to be on more and more of doing, and that rote learning has to go. It is important. It's equally important. I'm not denying the fact, because our shastras, we have learned things, learned by rote and done. Yes. But in that rote also, you learned a pattern. We were allowed to figure out a pattern. Students today are not figuring out patterns. And I think when you are able to identify patterns, I'm using this word patterns deliberately and a very comprehensive and a very wide sense. When we are allowed to identify patterns, we will be able to find new ways around those. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ruchita. We are running a little bit out of time, so I will quicken the pace. Siddharth, I had a follow-up to your question, to your input on the lack of market-industry linkages and the understanding of it. So would you be able to share with us some probably initial ideas or raw thoughts on how do we ensure better market and industry linkages? And how do we give the students better exposure, a realistic exposure to entrepreneurship?
Yes, thank you. So on a larger aspect, so under Bharat Tech Foundation, we are creating a program called Guru Shishya Mentor-Mentee program. So that's not purely for entrepreneurship per se, but that is for larger technical slash entrepreneurship mentorship program through, it's all online, it's hybrid discussions, that kind of format, right? But along with that, I would say that could be one methodology. But beyond that, going into a little more of a different suggestion that I would like to make is a concept called Karma Bhumi Connect. So where, for example, if somebody is from Hubli in Karnataka, this person has built himself in Hubli, studied in the local schools, in colleges, and is all over the world, is leading an institution somewhere thanks to his or her creativity and learning and development. So connect that person to your locality. He or she will have that heart to work in their own locality. You don't need to nudge a lot for that. And that person's funding and mentorship and knowledge inputs, everything could be connected to a series of a group of students. And such linkages could be facilitated. That is one something that I believe not many are doing in the country, or maybe I'm not aware. Um, so Karma Bhumi connecting people to their Karma Bhumi, their heartland, their village, to guide and mentor the future, the next generation coming from that village could be one. Second, so with looking at an institution's lens, right, there is a success story which has happened from one of our discussions that happened in Maharashtra. So in VNIT Nagpur, there is something called Merino Lab. So Merino is an industry that works on a lot of these plywoods, and kind of they work on innovating and creating new products on those lines. So they have set up a lab within VNIT Nagpur, where the PhD students and work on in the problem statements given by the industry, and they handhold throughout the entire process. And once after completion, they implement it in that industry as well. And then they work on a partnership agreement with that company, and they also give a GTM channel also to sell their product through their network as well. So this is the second aspect, setting up labs within the institutions in such entities. And on a third aspect, one is could be a solutions factory lab, bridging that connect with the schools and the local administration and local communities, where students go into the community and identify problem statements, work with local NGOs, work with local self-help groups, etc., to understand and be with them and understand problems. And then later work on using design thinking or whatever, using those frameworks to create solutions. But this would be a mechanism where they identify problems from the locality by being with actual people who are affected, not sitting in some school lab or some AC rooms and then figuring out solutions and such. So these are three things that some things that I thought about some time back while looking at these problem statements specific to industry/market, schools, and community linkage. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Shubhankarji would love to hear your thoughts on this too.
Can you just repeat the question once, because I think I missed the exact question?
Yeah. So, how do we better ensure better linkages between industry and market? Because one of the points that Siddharth raised was also that there's a lack of understanding of market, and also probably just to add on to it, is there any way we can incentivize them? So, just your very initial raw thoughts on this.
See, I think when it comes to incentivizing, of course, the only thing which I am seeing in the horizon is like you do in university, right? You start having these internship programs, so instead of, during summer vacations, maybe there can be some kind of a 2-week mandatory internship, which gives the students some kind of an industry exposure, right? Or some real time experience, like growing up. I always say that I started my entrepreneurial journey when I was 12 years old, because that's when I put up my first sales stall at my local resident welfare Diwali Mela, right? And I was very happy that I made some money as well. So I think giving them that early on experience is the only way we can give them that holistic exposure to real time business or real time entrepreneurship experiences. So I think one thing which can be maybe circulated is that how we can give them a 2-week or 3-week actual industrial exposure, of course at a senior scale, like after 8th grade or 10th grade. But otherwise, I think the focus has to be more towards the school, because as a student, you're still evolving. By the time you finish your undergrad and your postgrad, you may have a totally different perspective about things. But getting the right basics and value systems inside them is what is more critical at that stage.
Thank you, Shubhankarji. So when we are talking about gap, I also would like to understand where would you think is the best for government to step in to make the ecosystem conducive, or fix the gaps? At what point do you think the government should step in and put some ground rules? Just your thoughts on. I would like to hear from all three of you. Siddharth, Shubhankarji, please go ahead.
I think the government has already stepped in, right? And after NEP 2020, the curriculum has substantially improved. Projects like Atal Tinkering Labs and now their phase 2, right, is also going to be very critical. We are seeing a huge number of schools setting up different kind of AI labs, right, with support from foundations, and some of them are doing it as their own in-house initiatives. Some of them are trying to raise funds through alumni structures, right? So the government should not step in and come out with like a proper guideline on something like this, that this is how it should be. Government's role has to be proactive in order to create a better ecosystem of entrepreneurship, which is supported by academia and by industry at the same time. If we make it just government and schools, we will stop seeing any inputs inside it at all. It has to be like some kind of a autonomous body should monitor this space instead of the government trying to monitor this space. It can be an association of schools in different states, and some kind of a structure where the government is also present, so the government is also getting real-time feedback. But this autonomous body is also getting real-time feedback from the industry, that this is what we feel 5 years down the line is something which will be required a lot more for us.
Thank you, Shubhankarji. Siddharth?
So actually, I was working with the office of the PSA, right? So we have a platform called Manthan. So Manthan is a platform that is created to create such industry academy R&D collaborations happen. And there is a specific area given for school innovation also. So such linkage happened, but though on a very small scale, do school innovations come out in such a grand manner. But still, there is good work done by the government, right? But the thing is, real, actual, significant changes would only happen if the society, the industries, and everybody gets involved, right, in the whole creation of such frameworks and everything. Expecting the government alone to do something like that would not work. One. Second, I completely agree with Shubhankar, where government should not come out with a complete regulation before something has reached a point where there is a need for it. Right now, there's significant amount of work. We are probably in the stage 1 or 2 with creating school innovation in from my understanding, and there is a lot of work to be done. And from coming to that initial point, let us all be rebels and actually create something out of the box and reach a point where there are regulations needed. Let's not curb our questioning, or let government not come into the picture right now with regulations. But that being said, government should be facilitators. Yes, we can work with office of the PSA, Manthan, or probably Ministry of Education and all that in creating such initiatives as well. Thank you.
Yeah, Ruchita ji.
Yeah. So, yes, I agree with what Shubhankar ji and Siddharth ji have said. Would like to just add a few things. See, when we look at what the government should do, actually the government is doing quite a few things. We need to see how the change can be monitored, because unless you monitor the change, it's not going to be sustained. So what have they done? Let's just take a few random examples. One, today most universities have something called as a professor of practice, wherein you have people from the industry who are mentoring students through by way of lectures, maybe special lectures, or their alumni who is appointed. One alumni member is a professor of practice. This can increase. The number of professors of practice can increase. Part of NEP, where you have volunteering, this is another point, volunteering and community engagement. So students are expected under NEP to put in a few hours, by way of which they do get 2 credits also, which could be part of on the job training, which is under the national apprenticeship and training scheme 2.0. And also under this, so under that scheme, they do get, the student gets some few rupees, so that that's an apprenticeship till he gets a job or till he can train in the industry. So it's not that the student is left just like that. The industry can pay him a small amount, and some part is already facilitated by the government based on whether you're a diploma or whether you're a a graduate. So that is under the NTAS scheme. So you have an on the job training which is helping you understand the industry problems, which the industry problem can be given to that student to work on, that graduate or that student to work on, while he is also receiving training, because it helps him understand the mindset of that organization and several other things. So there is a connect that is built. Now, this particular scheme can be extended while the student is in college, which some colleges in Mumbai are actually doing. We are ourselves associated with this on the job training kind of thing, by we providing internships to students while they are still studying in colleges and all. And that way we get them to understand on the ground, because one of the things that our organization does is you got to hit the ground. You can't sit on your in fancy offices and work. You got to hit the ground, understand the ground, build your thing. That way there is a clear understanding of what is the requirement on the ground in whichever area the student may be interested, because you may have different areas you work in. So that kind of thing is there. So this can be combined, like just extending the points that Mr. Shubhankar and Siddharth said, that we can get all these together, bring them together to create, that's where that ecosystem can be strengthened. And the government can do an evaluation and monitoring of it, because at the end of it, we need to evaluate whether these steps taken are actually the impact of it. We may do an impact, forget the impact, but we need to understand and monitor how this is working. This could be a pilot, and which you can then scale up based with caveats for on ground situations, because one size won't fit it all when it comes to the different institutions. Because we ourselves have seen that when we are working in J&K, there are certain things that will work, but the same formula is not going to work in Goa or in Maharashtra. And want to connect this to the previous question that you had asked about the industry connect. So at the school level, you have visits, these, what are they, the exposure, not exposure visits, you call them field visits. So these field visits, to make them more local, and like Siddharth ji said, that you got to feel for your place, the place where you come from. So engaging them in a 1 week kind of a thing, the students engaging with the industry for a week gives them a flair to understand what is happening. They understand it better. They are able to look at it from a different perspective, because they have there's no binding on them to think for a solution to this, but a simple observation. In fact, there was a student from Kashmir who identified some technology to grade the apples, which grading apples does happen there, but he came up with some innovative solution. So these kind of things come up when you are actually at a small scale, because every farmer there is not a big farmer, there are small farmers. Now these small farmers need solutions. You can't say, okay, just give your produce to a large farmer or a large entrepreneur and get it done. He also has his own aspirations. So these will come when these small different things are connected. Like, we have a lot of systems, we need to build convergences. For example, there is a scheme ABCD, some scheme is there, there is NEP. Now we need to combine, bring a convergence at a particular point without the regulations being affected. Because what will happen otherwise, you'll say, oh, it's his duty to handle NEP 2.0 2020. Somebody will say, oh, it's not my work to do NTAS evaluation 2.0. So those things need to be defined, rather than creating too many new things and all of them becoming hodgepodge. What we have, we need to analyze, we need to build convergences, and then give it a framework maybe to how to make it most effective on a pilot basis. Once that pilot is working, then we may scale up. Because what happens is, often the pilots, if they are not well done, it will fail putting that whole system into place, and then everything backfiring, then people will simply label the government. Here we are allowing for time for the three stakeholders, the government, the industry, and the educational system, to converge and then be able to see what comes out of it. Yes, of course, like we said to start with, we may not even exist to see the result of some of these things, but the seed has to be sown. So I think looking at it this way would be better than, could be one way, rather than just saying that the government needs to do it all. I think a big role the government can facilitate with, like, for R&D being given more, other provisions like tax rebate for the R&D done by the industry, or the framework where the industry should ensure that there are certain X number of schools or colleges they may connect with on a yearly basis for a short period of time, not saying the whole way, because everybody has their own frameworks and their priorities and principles, so they cannot step too much beyond it. But because the societal thing is there, even the CSR that is there, why not mold it in such a way that the CSR that we have is in such a way, not everywhere, but in some way where the educational thing comes in for the CSR. It, rather than simply taking education too, yes, it's needed in the towns and smaller villages, but combine this element for it as an impact tester. One of the key parameters, the KRAs or the KPIs that we can put for this would be the impact in terms of what kind of projects or what kind of initiatives the students have been engaged in, which will be problem solving for their locality, wherever that event is taking place. So thinking differently would be more than could be a solution to your point that about the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchita. I do have a couple more questions, but I think I will stop for a bit to take questions from the audience. You can either unmute and speak, or you can put it in the chat and I can read it out. Either way is fine with me. We have a question from Kavita ji. What should this team keep in mind? Top 3 suggestions maybe while making a pan-India policy on entrepreneurship education, I'm guessing. The parallel to that, we also have what policy mandates are essential for entrepreneurship education to become mainstream. So these are the 2 questions. If you would like the question to be directed at any one panelist, I would be happy to. Otherwise, it's open to all 3 of you.
So, Aswathi, I think I'll just like to answer this one. So, of course, we all gave a couple of suggestions, many of which are having an intersection at most of the points as well. But something I feel which we should do early on is something which China is doing now, right? So the Chinese have started doing a very intensive psychometric analysis right from the age of 7 years and onwards, right? So they are able to do a detailed psychometric analysis on each and every student, so that by the time the student comes in high school, and then when the student is going from high school to their university education, they are able to assess that will this student be better at research, or will this student be better at entrepreneurship, or will this student be better for say the defense services. So I think we need to start filtering out early on where how we can guide our students properly, because we don't have any kind of psychometric analysis tools today. And some of the private schools do have counseling sessions and in-house psychologists who do interactions with students. But I think today, with the help of AI and the kind of modern tools which we have available, I think we can provide a very, very holistic solution pan India for all government schools without the need for any kind of physical capex on that model. And this can basically create a repository of talent nationwide for us. You see how the Chinese were so smart that so over the years we have been trying to see why our medals don't increase in Olympics, right? Whereas the Chinese have been slowly gaining traction very fast. So they do proper anthropometric measurements on students early on, and they are able to figure out which student will go into basketball, which student will go into gymnastics, which student is better for team games. So I think that is where we need to start working.
Siddharth, Ruchita, any thoughts on this?
Yeah. So, looking at the pan-India possibilities, yes, Shubhankar ji mentioned a very interesting one, doing a psychometric analysis. That's where the foundation lies, right? You understand what exactly, where exactly, and what kind of initiatives could be done too. So, but I look at it from a different lens, right? So, some of the aspects that we as social organizations, industries could work on. So, looking at it from the other side, to build organic solutioning would be, as I mentioned, one is a rampant mentor-mentee programs. Linking that also with the Karma Bhumi Connect, actually bringing the people who have taken value or taken resources from their villages and achieved success, bringing them and connecting them, creating platforms, creating, incentivizing that kind of a connect, being facilitators to that. So that would be second. Third would be creating solutions factory labs to go beyond just creating innovative tech products or anything like that. Blending with community through these labs so that people, so young students are aware of social issues and can create solutions for exact problems, and then linking all that together. So one, solutions factory labs for student and society connect, mentor mentee for experts and students and school connect, the Karma Bhumi Connect for people who are experts, who are leading entrepreneurs, etc., to come and connect with the students in local tier 2, tier 3 locations. So these three would be some of my humble suggestions for improving entrepreneurship and innovation in the country.
So I will look at this from the angle of doing three things at the level, starting from the smallest level, and then it automatically goes to the level of the nation. The policy may be a national policy, pan-India policy, as the question says here. So I go with the first one being mapping the student, just as we map skills and all. And I think one of the angles that Shubhankar ji has indicated with the tests and all could be one of the aspects that we can take in when it comes to mapping. So there can be a comprehensive mapping of the student. Then the training So, which will again, of course, take into account the points that Siddharth mentioned about the mentor mentee and some of these. And the third is testing and testing with acknowledgement. Okay, because anything, when you want something to work well, there has to be a test to see that it's working. And the second is that there has to be acknowledgement of the effort, because at the end of it, if there is no acknowledgement to complete that thing, there is nothing to drive the system to move ahead. Now, obviously, doing this at a national level will fail because we cannot reach every single corner. And then what are the parameters and all? Of course, parameters have to be defined in advance for all of these and then take it. But it should be the scheme, though it will be pan India, would be operational and evaluated, or the monitoring and evaluation of this can happen at the level of the panchayat where applicable, or the block, or these, because that's where we get, we fail to get some of the best talent because we are not able to, like when I work in Gurez, the border area in Kashmir, it's far flung, but that does not mean there's no talent there. I saw some innovative, the children came up with, with the songs for their system, the games, tweaked their games because of um, the weather being pathetic there, like for months they have snow and they are unable to play, so they have tweaked certain things. So which means, but no, who will go to Guris, who will reach out to those people there? So things need to work, and this kind of a policy will have to be made applicable, uh, like right from at the level of the panchayat, and then take it to the next, so each thing gets mapped correctly. We don't miss out on the mapping, because once the mapping is correctly done, like Shubhankar ji really, well, it was very rightly said that you identify who's good at what from the at the start, and then yes, of course, there will be some things which will keep changing, like just as you may do the MBT test, or you may do a wide range of tests when it comes to employees, but at the end of it, you can't judge on one just because somebody's Johari window is something and somebody's MBT test is something else. You're not going to write off that person. So it has to be comprehensive, which takes into account different elements, and that one test will be comprehensive, so it will give us a nationwide mapping when we look at it as a whole. And that way, sorry, when it comes to giving opportunities to these at a higher level, we are able to filter and take what is best for maybe advanced level guidance or mentoring, or exposure outside of the country, whatever. So these will be the four things: mapping, training, testing, and acknowledgement.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? If not, we can just do a quick one round and then wrap it up. So I had a question to all three of you. In India, what could be something, those are low hanging for us to get in entrepreneurship education right now? Starting with Siddharth ji, Shubhankar ji, and then Ruchita ji.
The low-hanging fruits with respect to entrepreneurship education. But from what lens? Which lens? Is it from the government lens or?
Probably from a government lens.
From a government lens, I believe. I mean, honestly speaking, immediately we can do a lot of things. That is there, right? Like, government is doing something again. That's industry academy R&D collaboration, which the Office of PSA is doing. Just ramp it up, give it a little more PR, and push it to every place, and then probably have a lot of regulations and mandates also. Those are things, but honestly speaking, right now, since I am out of it, I'm looking at it from a longer term perspective, right? So if we can have a particular percentage mandate for industries to actually work with schools and all that, that is true. But what is organically something that we can do which has long term sustainability? So some of the immediately doable tasks is what I mentioned as my suggestion: the Karma Bhumi Connect, the mentor mentee program, and also to create these solutions factory labs. And solutions factory labs, not purely government doing that alone. I'm talking about working with industries to do it. There has to be a pull, and there has to be a monetary financial commitments to it. So those could be the short-term actions that could be taken for impact. But as my colleagues rightly mentioned, there is a long-term aspect that we have to keep in our mind. Of course, we need to have good analysis at the base level. And beyond that, I would say there is, rightly mentioned, go beyond just the theoretical understanding and improve the curriculum. Improve the curriculum so that there is something way more than just theoretical understanding, but actually give real world problem solving, real world experience, exposure. And secondly, let us try to inculcate the habit of asking questions. Let us create such teacher training programs where they are trained to actually allow or facilitate questioning and create more rebels who think out of the box. Rebellion with a cause. The cause is given by the teacher, rebellion is done by the students, and we have a national transformation happening. Thank you. Over to you.
Aswathi, I have a suggestion, I think, which can, maybe, really create long-term impact as well. So, when it comes to getting those right mentors for, these aspirational students who may want to start out early during school, maybe the government can help create some kind of a platform where the entire school alumni can be mapped. And then, successful entrepreneurs from the same school can give maybe online consultation or maybe physical consultations and interactions to these students, because that will create the right emotional connect for them as well. Because, maybe 20 years ago or 15 years ago or 30 years ago, they were wearing the same shoes as the student today. Because we honestly in India, we don't really have the concept of creating and nurturing our alumni. So this can be maybe a new start, where those because I'm very sure many people will come back and contribute.
So I think I agree with the sustainability part and what Shubhankar ji has also said about effectively using our human resource, developed human resource as a give back to society. And when you look at it from the government's perspective for low hanging fruit, I think something that happens in and out every day in the school, I think it's just get the students to work on projects that are that will provide a solution to their regional problems. Identify the regional problem and try to find a solution to it, and then take this up. This can happen with the teacher, student, and the parent in place. I think in this case, I would like to one example, one initiative that is widely being undertaken in Pune is they have something called as Shikshan Vivek, and under Shikshan Vivek, they have a small magazine which the contribution to that magazine is by the student, by the parent, and by the teacher. And they come up with some amazing things, as the solution. The students come up with some amazing things for their for some of the problems. They just think out of the box. Then there is a parent who's contributing and the teacher who's contributing. So at the lowest level of the school, I think aligning the parent, teacher, and the student communication is really important from the with a deliberate deliberation among the three on entrepreneurship, because this will have long-term solutions to the job and livelihood and issues that we currently have, and it will set the ball rolling at this stage, and then we can have at the next level all other systems to top it up. So have a dialogue happening, a conscious dialogue which is happening between the student, teacher, and the parent on entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruchita ji. And thank you, Siddharth ji, Shubhankar ji. This has been such an interesting conversation for me as well. I've thoroughly enjoyed the last 90 minutes. I'm sure the rest of the participants did too. I hope all three of you had fun too. Thank you so much from us, from India House, and from everybody here. So, namaste.
Namaste. Thank you, Aswathi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aswathi. Fantastic
Really
questions, and thank you for making us think.
I'm glad. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care. Take care.